We're going to be looking, in this first presentation, we're going to be looking at healthcare technical memorandum, yeah? There is a migration, and we are hoping to get the HTMs revised in the next year or two. We're going to have a journey from what healthcare guidance was, what is today, and what could be in the future. Disclaimer, my participation here today is as an independent consultant for education purposes, nothing to do with my NHS Wales employment. The presentation is to promote continual improvement, discussion and patient safety. It's not policy of any government within the UK, okay? So just please be aware of that context. So when we look at Henry Ford, yeah? Henry Ford made a statement, if you always do what you always done, you always get what you always got, yeah? Do we agree with that? Yeah, anybody disagree? Yeah? I think that's clear and concise guidance, isn't it? When we look back in time, a lot of our industry developed on the back of pharmaceutical techniques, practices, etc. And one of the major triggers for change was an incident in Devonport, Plymouth, back in 1972. And the final conclusions of this report, which was based upon an inadvertent sterilisation error, the committee considers that too many people believe that sterilisation of fluids is easily achieved with simple plant operated by men. Obviously, you've got to take it in the right context. It was the 1970s. Men of little skill and the minimum supervision, a view of the task which is wrong in every respect. And I think even to this day, some people probably agree with that ethos, you know, simple tasks, untrained personnel, yeah, which is as far from the truth as you can get, because decontamination, as we know, is a science and needs to be treated as a science. So back in 1972, some of you may have seen this before, Wales were the best rugby team in the UK. How times change. Dirty Leeds were the Division 1 champions back then. Better than Liverpool back then, yeah. Chuck Berry was #1 with a song called My Ding-a-Ling, yeah. What was all that about? And the press highlighted the Devonport issue, yeah. 5 fatalities on the back of that particular incident. The findings: lack of standardisation in sterilisation practices, poorly maintained and validated equipment, yeah? There was a major issue with the drain configuration. Lack of technical awareness, incorrect loading pattern. Now, those two particular items, my team are involved in the commissioning process today and having the very same arguments and discussions with a particular supplier on those two particular points. The summary of the findings said there was a need for concise regulations, standards and guidance, yeah? Has that changed? Probably not. So on the back of Devonport, the Orange Guide, the Guide to Good Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Practice, was enhanced, improved, made more robust. How many of you remember HTM 10? Come on. There's a couple of slow hands going up. It's time to retire, guys, yeah? That's a long time ago. I don't remember it myself, but yeah. Good documentation, yeah? HTM 10 was related to sterilisation equipment. It gave guidance on choice, purchase, installation, testing, commissioning, use and maintenance. A very practical document, something I think today's HTMs may have drifted away from. On the back of that, over the years, we've had other documentation. HTM 2010 was the following document to HTM 10. 5 volumes, yeah? In depth, good guidance. 2030 then came along for washer disinfectors. When I was a young man back in the day, working in an estates department, and they had an SSD, and there were no cabinet, no validated washer disinfectors. At best, it was a deluge washer. An operator would come down, pull the arm, there'd be a tremendous deluge of water. If the operator decided 2 minutes was enough, 2 minutes it was. Yeah? How we've come on in my career. And we've had various circulars through the various parts of the UK. HTM 2030, a very similar principle to what we highlighted in HTM 10, giving guidance, choice, specification, purchase, installation, validation, testing, etc., engineering requirements. Again, a very concise document. Then we had the awareness in the late 90s with VCJD and other very dangerous pathogens, and we decided that decontamination in the UK was not to the standard that we require. So, NHS England, Scotland, Wales, all had internal reviews, looked at their processes, allocated money, project groups, etc., and that's where decontamination grew to where it is today. Yeah, control departments, validated equipment, workflows, etc. Then we had a blip. 2010, we had CFPP. How many of you remember CFPP? A few more, yeah? I think we had a few layers with HTM 10. I think a lot of people remembered it, but yeah. Now, the CFPP gave a choice. You can either achieve, or you should achieve, the essential quality requirements, the base standard, but you should move towards best practice. However, catnap, those of you who probably heard this before, if people are given choice, they'll always choose the cheapest route, yeah? The cheapest available technology to narrowly avoid prosecution, yeah? They will choose the simplest option with the less hassle. And there was a lot of furore in the industry to move back to a HTM format, and that's where we went. The last HTM revision was around about 10 years, 2015-16. Based upon evidence through the ACDP, there was a risk identified with prion proteins and the need to monitor our decontamination effectiveness. And I think the document was good. However, I think we got a bit hung up on protein monitoring, yeah? There was a war, basically. How should we monitor our protein? In situ monitoring, swabbing, etc. And it did get quite unpleasant. So when we rewrote the WHTM, probably about a year later, we actually looked at the processes and built in the need to reprocess within a 24-hour period, the use of moist bags for surgical instruments, keep them moist, remove the protein, the actual need to disassemble the medical devices to make sure it is exposed to the actual detergents and the wash process. So actually do it better rather than alongside the monitoring of the effectiveness. And that's what we built into the WHTM. And the initial meetings I've had with English colleagues, they would like to upload that particular practical awareness into the new HTM format that will hopefully follow. So as of today, we have a host of documents that are related to decontamination. Yeah, I work with other AEs in my office, AE, HV, LV, ventilation. How many guidance documents have they got? Yeah, 2/3. HTM 0101 Part A to E is 5 sections. WHTM 0106 in Wales, we've got 6 sections, yeah? Which is the science? I speak in jest. But yeah, within decontamination, you've got to be aware of all these. How many of you are not aware of HTM00? I'll ask. Everybody's aware of it. Oh, fair play. A knowledgeable audience. So as you can see, there's documents everywhere. So I think there's been a change of thought. Rather than everybody going off on their own, Wales, Scotland, England, Northern Ireland, there is a need for consistent guidance, because basically we're all decontaminating to the same standards, yeah? So hopefully everybody is going to get together, and certainly initial meetings seem to be quite harmonious. Things can change, but we are looking to provide a suite of documents that does give clarity to service providers, to SSD managers, endoscopy users, ultrasound users, etc. That approach needs to be consistent. The guidance needs to be descriptive and supportive, yeah? If we've got to risk assess, we need guidance to make sure we can risk assess. We have to consider the standards and the regulatory framework of the UK, Europe and the world. We have to understand the legal compliance, yeah, of not conforming to best practice. So hopefully all that particular facts will make for a good HTM in the future. So this is my thought process, yeah? Areas to consider in the HTM 010 series. Engineer competency. Cycle optimization. Now, we had a presentation at CSC in regard to sustainability. Very important topic. However, where does decontamination fit with sustainability? Yeah? Some would argue, if you think of water usage, some would argue we should be using more water to clean medical devices rather than less. A debate for another day, I'm sure. We need to understand all the regulatory risks. We need, I missed the life cycle. We need guidance for the full life cycle of a medical device, not just the SSD. What happens to it after it leaves the SSD? Where's the guidance? Where's the information? Endoscopes, yeah? A huge problem area. We know biofilm exists and we're never going to overcome it. It's been there before our day and it'll be there after our day. But we can control, we can reduce, we can make the situation better. Water testing, validation methodologies and infrastructure, all areas that we should investigate further. So if we think of the current engineering governance requirements, at the minute there is no requirement for ongoing training, yeah? An engineer comes in, he or she may be trained by the manufacturer. In this example, they went to Eastwood Park in 1995. They didn't do a training course after that, and that engineer is still out in the field. How is that right? How do we know the qualifications of engineers, yeah? Engineers coming in, you may have a 3-phase, 415-volt piece of equipment. How do we know that engineer is competent to work on that equipment? You've not seen any evidence of their mechanical or electrical qualifications. Some of the engineers out there jump from manufacturer A to B to C to D. How do they know about a particular equipment? One minute they're a product specialist for one company, then they're with another company next week. When they attend site, are they aware of your trust protocols? Yeah? Because you are allowing them into your environment. If the HSE come along and that engineer has unfortunately died as a result of electric shock, you guys are going to be asked who gave them permission to attend site. A lot of this is the actual responsibility of an APD. How many APDs are actually governing a lot of this information? There are good examples, but there are examples where an APD is just a tick box exercise. Decontamination life cycle, yeah? Transportation, where's the guidance? Clean room management in accordance with ISO 14644, Class 8 clean room requirements. Where's the guidance, yeah? If you have a failure in your particulate counts, what do? Panic, run away, take a day off on the sick. Disposal, procurement, yeah? What do we do when we purchase instruments? Are you guys, as decontamination managers, involved? Or are you just given a device and told to get on with it? Robotic surgery was a prime example of that back in the day. And when we get to clinics, when we get to theatres, how many times do you see tray on top of tray, on top of tray, on top of tray? Yeah? A common occurrence. Hopefully, we can build guidance that may help you with those factors. When we looked at some of the more intricate medical devices, again, robotics come into this. Yeah? We talk about moist environments, and I'll come on to that. SSD, I'm in total support of that. Loading patterns, dedicated carriages, yeah, we have to present it to the washer disinfector in the correct manner. Are we using surrogate devices to test? This particular alert here was in regard phaco handpieces. Are you cleaning those correctly? I don't know. Go and have a look when you go back, but there should be clear irrigation of those devices, and when you put it in the sterilizer, it should be positioned in a certain vertical manner to ensure moisture can drain. Are you doing that? I'll let you think about that. Ultrasonics, we may need ultrasonics. Over the years, there's been a migration away from the ultrasonics, and all too often the ultrasonics will sit in the corner, some sort of dinosaur, yeah? Never to see the light of day. It's there for a purpose, a necessary purpose. We talked about biofilms within endoscopes. I've said we're not going to eradicate, but we can control. How many of you wash your endoscope washers, yeah? You buy them on a 20-minute cycle. Yeah, my word, that's a fabulous quick cycle. But is it an effective cycle? Yeah. What we've done in Wales, we ask for a 5-minute purge. You're never going to get a dry endoscope at the end of your washer. However, if we can remove 80% of moisture, we'll be in a better position than we are at the start, yeah? Controlled environment storage cabinets. My colleagues in the room today, well, a couple of them are going grey on the back of that at the moment. Yeah, are they being tested correctly? And there's no blame on manufacturer, no blame on anybody, but it's a system that needs looking at. Moist environments, yeah? We spoke about the surgical instruments, keeping an instrument set in a moist environment. With endoscopes, that's probably the worst thing we can do. If we talk about biofilm formation, retaining it moist is probably, like you say, the wrong thing to do. And I've been promoting moist environments for years. However, I've had a bit of a change of heart. Manual cleaning, that's a big issue. Microbiological surveillance, yeah? Should we be testing our endoscopes? Just be wary, you may not like the answers. So validation methodologies, if we are developing a HTMs, yeah? A lot of the validation methodologies have not changed for many, many years. Even when Chris Evans worked in an SSD back in the day, yeah? A lot of the sterilizers back in the day were set up on a pressure reducing valve, yeah? That controlled the temperature. Today, modern electronics, microprocessors, control is different to what it was back then. So should we alter our regimes to suit? Can we be using technologies such as data loggers to give us probably a more effective weekly test? People would argue it's better to have an engineer in front of the machine listening to the noises, the pumps that squeal, yeah, door seal leaks, and I don't disagree with that. So there's a bit of a balance on that, which possibly as an industry we should think of as we are going on. A lot of the independent monitoring systems are better now, and they self-monitor. But if a manufacturer claims that they do self-monitor, do you ever test? Yeah. So if there's a 2-degree deviation, do you ever actually put that 2 degrees on the machine to make sure that it actually picks that up? One for the validation. The Bowie and Dick test. Yeah. Now I'm probably going to get killed for saying this. Is the Bowie and Dick test, is it replicating today's devices as a daily test? Could we be embracing some of the electronic technologies that are available? Yeah? I don't know. But I think it should be looked at. And perhaps if an electronic system is available, you have to compare the sensitivity to what you have with some of your systems that you use on a daily basis. Because not all these Bowie Dick offerings are as sensitive as they should be. Yeah? So whichever way you go, you need to check the sensitivity. Clean and efficacy tests, similar to the last discussion point. Are the test soils that we're actually using, are they enough of a challenge? I guarantee if you put that soil strip in a cup of water, within 5 minutes, the soil will be removed. And that's without any mechanical action, that's without any process detergent. So I think as an industry, I think that provides a good basis of flow. Yeah? If there's no water flow, that will give a failure. However, possibly we should be looking at more efficient soils in this day and age. And should we be using some of our, surrogates, certainly within the endoscopy world, a surrogate that actually reflects an endoscope? Now, IHEEM put a paper together talking about surrogates, about controlled environment cabinets, and the need to actually verify the testing using surrogates that do replicate an endoscope. Yeah? So how many are not aware of that guidance? Everybody's aware of it? Or people got dislocated shoulders, they don't want to put their hands up. Yeah? Yeah? Thank you. Like you say, these publications are there. Have a look at them. They will enhance your knowledge, and hopefully, going forward, it will enhance the validation process. Surgical instruments or surgical implants. How many of you are in trusts where implants, screws, plates are just going round and round and round the decontamination circuit? How can you be guaranteed the screw, the plate, maintains its integrity when you use it, when it's been through a decontamination process 300, 400 times? Yeah? Harsh chemicals, harsh steam. So in Scotland, they've mandated that such items should be sterile. It doesn't go round the circuit. Supplied sterile, use, dispose. Rinse water testing, yeah? I think you all, especially with endoscopy, you all have your rinse water tests, you test weekly. You hope that your results become between 0 and 10. You hope there's no Pseudomonas aeruginosa, no environmental mycobacteria, and no Legionella. How many tests for Legionella? So if you don't look for it, how do you know you're going to get nil? I think going forward, we need to perhaps be more aware of what that colony forming unit is. Because if we have a result of two colony forming units of Pseudomonas aeruginosa have more of an impact to a bronchoscope than 20 colony forming units in a colonoscope. So we need to be aware of what the morphology is. PCR testing, yeah? A lot of labs now say they can PCR test. What does that give you? I know I've been involved with a couple of PCR tests, and the result comes back. I say, well, what does that equate to? I don't know. Yeah? So we need to have more guidance with PCR testing. And are we putting too much emphasis on water? We talked about the pre-cleaning systems, and these will evolve, yeah? But we need to have validation protocols for these systems, and perhaps the new guidance should consider that. We need to make sure they are efficacious, but they mustn't damage the scope either. So, yeah, there's a discussion point. Rob is going to be talking at the tail end of the day. The end of sinks is nigh. I can't see it myself, but I do think these type of devices will come in probably in high-risk applications initially. Who knows what the future may hold. Now, we talked about water, yeah? We are worried about zero colony forming units. What about the air that's used for the purge? Do we ever investigate that air? Do we ever test that air? Yeah? I've known on my particular patch where a compressor is commissioned by the manufacturer. Lo and behold, in 6 months' time, that compressor breaks down. The estates department, full of have-a-go heroes, come along with another compressor that they may have purchased from Screwfix that delivers a totally different. Other suppliers are available in case anybody works for B&Q. Yeah? So, yeah, that actually happened on my patch. And it probably happened on your patch as well, and you may not have been aware of it. But should we test the quality of this air periodically? I know Mark is there. Mark's been involved with the hospital, and they actually did that. They've actually instigated periodic testing of the air. Do we know, is it delivering the correct flow pressures down the lumens? Yeah? Should we connect to a medical air system? Another whole new world for discussion, because then you may be contradicting the medical gas regulations. Talk to your AE medical gas, don't talk to me on that. Infrastructure, yeah? I think the SSDs, I think the HBN13 is holding up quite well. Yes, it may need a little bit of a tweak for some of the innovations that are coming along, but generally HBN13 is still a good document. But what about endoscope decontamination facilities? The current 0106 still recommends single room decontamination, yeah? The horseshoe flow. Same door in, same door out. That has got to be removed. We need to be looking at ventilation, negative, positive pressure. Same principle as HBN13. We need to have control for hazardous chemicals, peracetic acid. We need to have low-level extraction. We need to be monitoring the environment, yeah? PA monitors, etc. There needs to be dedicated plant space. We can't have an RO plant in a clean room. We need to have it in its own environment. Don-Doffin areas. And should the clean room be a class 8? I'll leave that there because that's an argumentative point as well. Validation methodologies. Should we be embracing AI? I definitely think it's time for me to retire if we go that way. These are my thoughts. If you're in trouble, contact your AED. Yeah? And when big boys collide, there's always an argument. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.